Hi, everybody. We've got another day of headlines, and what headlines we have. Just yesterday, if you watched my video, I had just some of the predictions for next year, just looking at the lay of the land and seeing how things were going. And we know that forces on the right and the left wanted to get Trump out of the primaries, and we know forces on the left and maybe the right would like to get Biden out of the primaries. Both of these candidates seem to be the key players right now in going into the elections next year, but both of them have such incredible downsides, incredible negatives to their approval ratings, and lots of weird, concerning, unforced errors in the case of Trump and his past conduct, and fear about his future conduct, and Biden fears about his health and his cognitive abilities to undertake the difficult job of president going into another term. So here we have the first time in history that a court has banned a person from a ballot. And this has happened in California under the 14th Amendment that says that what happened on January the 6th, the attempt to prevent the certification of Biden's election of president in 2020, that attempt constitutes insurrection, and thus under the 14th Amendment, Trump is not qualified, according to the jurists, the judges in Colorado. He's not qualified to be on the ballot there. Now, I would say this is all very much in process right now, because it will be kicked up to other courts, to the Supreme Court. And with the Supreme Court, as many of the people there have been appointed by Trump during his tenure, and it's seen to be, that court is seen to be perhaps friendly to him. We saw the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Whether this stands or not, who knows? But it does show that despite my predictions and the way it looked yesterday, there's still a chance to get Trump off the ballot and allow one of these other Republican challengers like Nikki Haley or DeSantis to become the primary challenger. And those primaries start mid-month in January, so there's not much time to knock Trump off his pedestal at this point. COVID, I've ceased worrying about that. Some people wonder why I dress like a hippie or a hobo. And part of it is we see all these headlines here screaming at us all the time. And sometimes they can make us worry or anxiety ridden. And today's group of headlines that are being served up for us are certainly worry inducing going into the holidays. But I dress casually and act casually and have my long hair just as a way for myself to say, these things aren't going to touch me, and whatever happens, I don't mind much. I'm along for the ride. Same thing with COVID. You might get it, you might not. World's most powerful militaries. This was a peculiar list. I tried to read this and understand it. It's a lot of strange ideas. There is some criticism of it here, obviously. This is a list where this organization, who is this organization? Global Firepower. This is what they have a kind of a quantitative analysis of like how many ships they have, how many people are active service, this sort of thing, kind of sheer numbers, it seems like to me, in this ranking. And I just wanted to scan through here. Okay, we got Germany at 25, Thailand ahead of Germany. Thailand, of course, I'm an old expert on Thailand politics, if I do say so myself. And, the military in Thailand is created, designed, and implemented more as a political force than as a boots on the ground fighting force. And in their engagements in the past, you will see that. We have military bases right in the middle of the capital for various reasons, and they're more about coups than about protecting the country. So this sort of idea that they're one of the world's most powerful militaries is quite misleading. We have Taiwan. That's probably true. They have to be armed to the teeth to defend themselves against China's threats. They've developed quite a powerful domestic technology capability for a small country like that. Saudi Arabia, this is another bizarre one on the list. They've fought a futile war in Yemen to oust the Houthi rebels, and despite being arguably the richest country in the world, or one of the richest countries in the world, they've been unable to unseat the Houthis, and the Houthis right now are lobbing bombs out into the Red Sea, disrupting shipping there. And countries, the US, the UK, foreign coalition has had to come in to restore order. So Saudi Arabia probably is, well, they're in the midst of trying to develop their military, but so far they are not an effective force. I mean, essentially, you say real powerful militaries are militaries that take action on the ground. And that's a military like the United States, Israel, UK. Militaries that go to other places, point guns and shoot at people. Then you get to test all of your training, your manpower and equipment in real world situations that where unexpected things can happen. So those militaries get really, really polished. So it's not just numbers like this. So Saudi Arabia is not an experienced military, and not yet. And what they have done has not been effective in Yemen. Okay, we got Poland, we had Spain up there, Vietnam, Israel. This is, again, despite being a small country, they are a country that does a lot of actual real fighting on the ground over the years. So that's a tempered military. Iran, how strong a military this is, I would still contend it's a situation like Iraq. They was maybe in the 80s. Iran has a lot of money in their military, but they have the Iranian Guard, which is a kind of quasi-political force that monopolizes business opportunities in the country. So you wonder how effective Iran could really be if they were faced with the sort of thing Iraq was faced with the multiple invasions that the U.S. enacted against it. You know, in those cases, the U.S. maybe got caught in a quagmire the second time, but it's still, they totally destroyed and ruined the country. And if you're the person being invaded, you've got to take that into effect, that if you provoke the bear or the sleeping giant or the big power to come to your country, even though you may stalemate them, they're going to ruin your country and probably kill all your leaders. Australia is always a firm partner in international operations, along with the U.S. and the U.K. Their distance of their whole country and continent does make they have to rely on the logistics of other countries to put their soldiers into battle, but they're always there with people. Here's Ukraine, it's being tested. I don't think most people had any awareness of Ukraine's abilities or even knowledge of what was going on there before the invasion that Russia had. And of course, the worldwide lesson, the lesson of Ukraine, is they were foolish. They relied on promises from the West, from the UK, from the United States, and tacitly NATO, and they gave up their nukes with a promise that Russia would never invade them. Didn't work out. Did not work out. That's why nuclear disarmament is kind of dead in the world right now. You'd be a fool to give up your nukes because the assurances of safety are not worth the paper they're written on, unfortunately. Egypt does have a powerful military. Get a lot of money from the U.S. for that. Indonesia is definitely an emerging power. They have the population and the scope and the scale and the strategic placement to be one of the big emerging powers. Brazil, we have the whole idea of geopolitics and really geography, with countries in South America being sort of globally isolated. So they're neither strategically important nor vitally important. So they're just kind of isolated down there. It'd be nice to be isolated at kind of your paradise. Turkey, we've talked about this in the past months. This is one of the emerging powers of the world. They're coming back to where they used to be in the world. They were always a consequential power for many centuries, and just in the past little over 150 years or so, they were a minor power, but now they're in a strategic location right there. They have the balance of power right now in NATO in preventing new countries from joining NATO. They have their own internal struggles with separatism in their country that they want other countries to address. We've got Italy. I don't know, France. France has a lot of boots on the ground in Africa, and is always fighting wars there. Those things are hardly ever mentioned in the international press, English language press. You hardly ever hear about that, but they're there. Japan, they're not even supposed to have a military. Technically they have the self-defense forces, so they're not supposed to deploy overseas, and they're supposed to have this little internal police force. Of course, all through the Cold War, the U.S. and allies from time to time kind of regretted this idea that there was a self-defense forces there in Japan, because during the Cold War, the U.S. and the U.K., there were, not the U.S., U.K., the U.K. and the U.S. and the USSR. I've forgotten that Soviet Union, the forgotten country now. They always fought their battles through proxies, through proxy states, through proxy battles, through civil wars, where each side would back one side or the other. And this was because if the two countries, the U.S. and the USSR, fought head on, they would there might be a chance of nukes being involved. So you have these buffer conflicts that occurred. But the one place in the world where that wasn't the case was in those northern islands of Japan that Russia grabbed after World War II and held on to. And since the U.S. was the guarantor of Japanese security in the seas, and Japan was like, we just have our self-defense forces. It was always thought that in those islands, those disputed islands, this is where U.S. warships might come into contact with Russian warships, or something could happen. So there was always the feeling that Japan should kind of give up this self-defense forces thing. I think it's in the Constitution, amend that, so they could have a proper army, and they could defend all of their waters, and the U.S. would not have to be involved in the defense of Japan, and maybe Japan could be a military force again. Of course, others who are old enough, if you bring this up with, well, they're almost all dead now, but World War II vets, they're very happy that Japan was neutered militarily and could never do anything. So that's Japan. What else we got? Pakistan. Again, this is a country that's almost like a failed state. They're locked in this eternal struggle with India that looks like they're going to lose. There's a big danger of nuclear conflict there. There's a whole theory of thought where both those in India and Pakistan are both nuclear armed states, and there's a whole, you have mutual assured destruction theory, and it's too much to go into now, but if you read into it, there's that's really a flashpoint where Pakistan might feel eventually compelled to have a first strike situation. This is a very difficult place in the world, the Pakistan and India. South Korea, yes, South Korea. We got the UK, the big country that's involved in a lot of things. India is sort of still an emerging power, but it's a country that keeps to themselves in a way. They are like a world unto themselves. It's all maybe an oversimplification, but you would expect a country of the size and location of India to have a vast navy and for the whole Indian Ocean to be their playground, but it really isn't. And India has not been expansionist in its security or military efforts. We got China. Big emerging powers put a lot of money into its military. Whether it's a paper tiger or not, certainly China seems like a very competent state. We'll see what happens if they have to fight a big war with modern technology. And, I think they certainly are one of the major players now and the major players of the future. How competent and how ready they are to take that to fight, to actually fight, that's another issue. Russia, even despite what's happening in Ukraine right now, where there seems to be a stalemate, the West is not so interested in funding that war anymore. Russia still seemed to be kind of a spent force. They have shown through their invasion of the Ukraine that they're really not as powerful as they thought they were, and they've expended a lot of power and energy. See, even this showcase key limitations of Russia military capabilities. Even just trying to invade a next door neighbor hasn't worked out, hasn't been a slam dunk that everybody thought it has. And the U.S., far and away, massive bases, hundreds of bases around the world, still the policeman of the world, for good or ill. I don't know. Probably do want the U.S. I don't know if you want any of those other countries going out and securing the seaways. But that's kind of the state of the world. Like I say, that list is more just sort of like adding up numbers and saying these are the most powerful. But as the context I tried to put in there, there's a lot of other factors at work. Here's what I mentioned before, the Red Sea attacks from Yemen, from the Houthis there. The big Saudi Arabia military was ineffective in getting rid of them. This is this movie a lot of people are talking about, directed by, I think it's Alex Garland. It's about a civil war in the United States. The short story is, I can't imagine a real fighting war in the United States. You can imagine some succession and maybe devolution of power, but an actual fighting war, because the people who have guns, these are all conservative red states, and the military and police are all conservative right-leaning people. I can't imagine there's enough leftists who are militarized that could actually conduct a fighting war. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. At least that's the conventional wisdom. Here's Putin. Lots of threats. He's feeling good because Western aid seems to be, there seems to be less interest in Western aid. And I've repeated this and I've explained, really, I think that the U.S. and maybe the UK populace has been conditioned. Wars are bad. We had 8 years of George W. Bush. He had 2 big wars, a lot of funding into that. And the media incessantly said that He's a war criminal. He's going to be brought before the Hague. Wars are evil. We shouldn't be wasting all our money. It kills innocent women and children, etc., etc. So now here we are. We're in 2023, and I think a lot of people, even on the right side, the conservative side, feel, yeah, well, maybe that's right. You told us enough that we believe that. But it is an unfortunate end point, or a partial end point to history, because I think ultimately, despite some of those points about not funding war are correct, we don't want a dissolution of the sort of international order that has been tried to be built since World War II. We don't want to have an age of countries rolling out invasions, as it seems to be occurring right now. What's happening in Russia? China feeling like, hey, this is a great opportunity. The West is not engaged in defense anymore. Congress, slurs against people. This will be something, I think, fantastic to watch. There's a lot of fear that top people in politics and government, in business, were involved in this guy's super rich guy who was flying these rich guys out to his island for underage massages and stuff. This is what all of the conspiracy theories about Epstein's death in prison were. It's like, well, guess it was a suicide, but I'm sure a lot of people breathed a sigh of relief. But it'll be interesting about these names being released. Cool stuff in Iceland. I'm usually not interested in weather and natural disasters, but how cool it would be to go and see this. I've got all my JavaScript blocked, so you do not have to see crusty toenail ads and gross stuff like that. Now, here's the other side of the coin from trying to get Trump out. We have the same thing here on the Biden side. Biden is woefully unpopular compared to Trump, compared to anyone. He can't really participate in the debate anymore. Historically bad approval ratings, even compared to Trump. This is what we've been following for a couple months now. The powers that be would really like to get a replacement for him. And really, to be quite honest, if you replace Trump and Biden, that would definitely be better. Let's get a new generation in there of more sensible people, more competent people. It's amazing the American system has gotten into this petrified state where they're stuck with Biden and Trump on both sides, very weak. Here's more of the media talking about why, the media essentially being shocked that young people are not supporting the Democrats. We talk about several things here. We talk about inflation, the economy, immigration. Actually, I think this article I don't think mentions immigration, but okay, it mentions the war. You see, for a certain part of the U.S. Populace and for a lot of the U.S. media, they're quite perplexed that young people or any liberals or progressive people would not just think the country's going great and wonderful at this point. But there's almost perhaps a sense of denial, and I've pointed out several times the articles on the front page of the New York Times, not opinion pieces, not analysis pieces, but just articles explaining to people why they're mistaken to want to change in the presidency, that the economy is great. That they're in error in thinking that the economy is not wonderful, but rank and file people do see issues of inflation and foodstuffs and these sort of things. This also talks about the promises. One of the promises of the Biden administration is they were just going to, if you vote for us, we're going to outright pay your student loans. But what about people like me? I had to work to pay off mine. It doesn't seem fair. Well, anyway, that got all, I think it got tangled up in the courts. Here we have some, I don't think the word inflation is mentioned here, but we have voters worried about higher prices. But the thing, the whole point of this, the overall, it's peculiar to have this sort of article where the NBC News is sort of perplexed, and we have to explain, why in the world would anyone want to change from Biden? Why would anyone want to vote for Trump? But typically, when you have issues of the highest homelessness on record, inflation hitting foodstuffs, such high disapproval ratings about the way this administration has handled immigration, the starting of new wars after, many, many years of the media telling people why these wars are bad, all of these factors should just be understood that they're going to impact the person who's sitting in the White House, whether they're Republican or Democrat. But unfortunately, the media does kind of soft pedal these things now that a Democrat is in power, and that they're so afraid that Trump may come back. Trump just isn't a normal Republican. He's kind of a crazy rabble rouser, and there's no telling what he might do. And that's the most charitable way of saying that. What else do we have here? Stuff from NASA, pictures from NASA. This was from yesterday. I missed the show yesterday, but this is Texas governor signs bill that lets police arrest migrants who enter U.S. illegally, as opposed to the federal policy, which seems to be to just let them enter and then just kind of allow them to stay and work here with almost a favored status. That may be a simplification of it, but that is a public perception. And this is part of, in the ramp up to the election, they're trying to hit Biden hard, the president, to bring this immigration issue to the fore. So we have the states, which have their own power, enacting measures that are in conflict with the federal statutes, which is very common. Each state in the U.S. is sort of like its own little country. And we also had this U.S. closes 2 rail bridges to Mexico against migrant surge. I do subscribe to this thing called Ground News. This is not a sponsorship. I don't get paid for anything for it. I wish I had enough viewers to be sponsored, but Ground News has this thing where they have a bias report. So this was one of those articles that was published and played up in right-leaning publications, but in no left-leaning publications, which is most of them in the United States, the major ones. And of course, this would, again, the left-leaning publications have kind of gone a little soft on the Biden administration and their immigration policy. And so something like this shows that there might be a problem with too many illegal aliens heading into the United States. And so this was on the Ground News bias. There's some articles, because Reuters is a wire service. The other news services just take this and they put it in their offerings. But all the left-wing or the left-leaning publications, which is most of them, completely did not report this news. This is an example. And they have this on both sides. I think the one on the right side was something about a court in New York that is preventing debt companies from listing medical bills that are unpaid as a bad debt. And that's an issue in the United States. I don't know if it's in any other country, but the United States, you can go in for a broken leg and have to sell your house and go bankrupt. it's just the prices are sky high, and the insurance is not good. So the Republicans have been absolutely against any kind of universal health care, socialized health care, whatever, which is crazy because the lack of that prevents entrepreneurialism. It prevents capitalism. It prevents people from moving from job to job in the United States, which is something the Republicans should want to do. But so that article about the courts in the New York prohibiting the debt collectors for putting those bad debts on the reports, the right did not want to report that because that shows up the crisis that they do not want to solve. You know, they scream about the Obamacare thing, which was the kind of a universal health care that came in with the Obama administration, quite thankfully, and Republicans should be for that. It should be for improving that system because it helps the individual's economic situation to be able to change jobs without losing all their insurance or, you know, having to sell their house when they have a slight medical emergency. And then I think we have a bunch of downer things here. Let's end on an up note, but here's study: hypochondriacs die sooner. Oh, this is nice. The church is blessing same-sex unions. Got to get with the times, you know. Some things never change, but the things that always do change are our sense of ethics and morals. Just imagine sense of ethics and morals 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Go back through time. It's just, this is part of the evolution of the culture. Different things we accept and different things we think we prohibit or that we think are a big deal, and later we realize they aren't. Okay, more downer news. Biblical plague of frogs. That's about as down as you could get. We've got 2024 next year is bad for media companies. In California, they're going to turn wastewater directly into drinking water. Suppose that's good. Home sales crashed to lowest level in 15 years. What else do we have? Dating in your 70s has never been this much fun. That feels like a downer to me for some reason. And here's a eunuch maker admitting live streaming castrations. That's some modern age, I guess. This is my book. We go from castrations to this, but no, this is a novel of modern life in Bangkok. I'm so thrilled because this week it's just being carried by all the Asia bookstores in Thailand, in Bangkok, in Phuket, in Pattaya, in Hua Hin, in Chiang Mai. This is what I mean to be the definitive novel of life in Thailand for both foreigners and Thais. The loves, the despair, the yearnings, the way we live, the impulses that push us to the end of the world. So it's in Asia Books in Thailand. It's on Amazon and Kindle, and I think there's a hardback edition as well. So, let's do this here. These are our Art of War cards. And we pick a card every day to see if there's some wisdom that we can apply to our lives. And today we have bolt the door behind the thief. Got an alarm going off there. Bolt the door behind the thief. Render your adversary powerless by trapping him in a vulnerable position. And the basis of this is a trapped adversary loses his power to shape the outcome of the engagement. Usually I have something to say about how, this is supposed to be applied. You're not supposed to go out and go to war with somebody. You're supposed to apply these things metaphorically to business or personal dealings. I think mainly with how you deal with other people in a strategic fashion. So bolt the door behind the thief. Render your adversary powerless by trapping him in a vulnerable position. So I don't know exactly how I would do that in modern times without getting into trouble. But anyway, that's the headlines for today. We're getting closer to Christmas, but there still seems to be good news coming in. Sometimes something will be orchestrated to happen right before Christmas because it's kind of a dead time for news. People aren't paying attention and it might fly under the radar. So we'll be watching for that. I'll see you next time for more headlines. Bye-bye.